welcome to our latest episode of Security Noise, Minding the Gaps, on the podcast where we cut through the static and get real about information security. I'm your host, Jeff, and today we're going to get into the early stages of any red team operation, footprint discovery. Joining me are two absolute heavy hitters in the field, Lakhan and Oddvar, both of whom have carefully crafted techniques for mapping digital terrain before a single exploit ever launches. But before we jump into that, don't forget to join our Security Noise Discord. We've got a great community of defenders, researchers, and curious lurkers to talk about information security stuff all day. You can go to www.discord.gg/trustedsec to join. Well, this week in InfoSec here, Microsoft has disabled Explorer previews for files that contain certain mark of the web. In other words, anything that you've downloaded from the internet zone, and that way they do not show up in the preview pane of Explorer. Microsoft is doing this to prevent coerced authentication attacks. This is where a document like an HTML file contains links to a resource that will be authenticated via like NTLM or Kerberos. Usually the attacker will choose a resource that they control, but perhaps not if they're already able to sniff the network. When the shell attempts to authenticate as either a user or a machine that's currently logged in, the authentication message is captured and either relayed to some other resource, or perhaps the attacker will try to crack the hashes and recover the plain text information for authenticating elsewhere. This is an interesting one. I'm really curious, since it's so on point, what Hans and Oddvar think in terms of its impact on security in general, and if it's going to change any of their initial foothold tactics.
You go first, Hans.
Okay. I think it's a great practice. I'm a little frustrated. I shouldn't say a little frustrated. I find it frustrating that they would do that from an attacker's perspective. We have used that kind of preview before, mostly internally, though. Organizations tend to block outbound coerced connections like that. But when you're inside the network, that sort of thing we've definitely done before. And I think it's a good move on their part.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I would say in most cases, when we're talking about endpoints, I normally just want code executed, and I really don't. When coming from an external perspective, I don't care that much about getting hashes out, I guess. In most cases, I just want code executed. But of course, it might disrupt some of the techniques we use, as Hans said, internally. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's also good of Microsoft to finally fix this stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, it does probably not affect you guys so much because of the whole public zone, private zone network behavior that's now been present in Windows since XP now. So, but interesting anyway, probably more meaningful for the internal NetPen guys, I suppose. Well, with that, we will kind of move to our main topic here. Would one of you gentlemen, Oddvar or Hans, like to define kind of what footprinting is?
Go ahead. I took the last one.
Oh my God. Define what footprinting is. Well, I guess it would, for me, footprinting is about to understand what I'm about to attack. That's what I define as a footprint. So I understand what technology they have at play, and also like getting an understanding of the amount of users they have, or how they operate, how much online presence they have, and so on. Yeah, I would say just understanding the customer better is basically what footprinting is, what their presence is online, I guess, explained bluntly.
I'd expand on that. I mean, I know we'll go more in depth here in a bit, but not just the size of organization, but also geographic location, type of industry that they're in, and then, technologies that are being used as well. So it's understanding both the software and then the metadata around the organization.
Okay. So pretty much just researching the target and having a good idea of the technology stacks they're running and where those things are hosted. What are some of the techniques that you usually start out with, especially on the passive side, right? Because we usually like to begin with passive recon.
So what I like using, I mean, there's a suite of tools out there that everyone's heard of before, Shodan and CertSH and so forth. I like those. I like looking at the DNS records. I like looking at historical records from registration services. I think it's, now the name's escaping me. I'll have to get back. URL Scan.io is another one, is one where you can pull information from emails that have been scanned, stuff that doesn't touch the endpoint or the end user itself. One that I really like that I just came up across was a talk on at Black Hat by the folks Adam Langley and Ben I'm going to butcher his last name, but it's about regex for hackers. I highly recommend people, if you get a chance, to check it out. What they've done in the second half of their talk is going to GitHub and using regular expressions to search GitHub for endpoints and systems related to an organization. So sure, you have the top domain, but what about the subdomains? And a lot of times the subdomains that you'll find in GitHub aren't ones that are necessarily found in a DNS zone transfer or in a register through service. So I think that's a great utility, or a great. I actually, to be honest, I spent a lot of my time looking at GitHub when researching an organization. GitHub and LinkedIn tend to be my go-tos for my initial reconnaissance.
DNS specifically, do you look for any particular record types besides just trying to enumerate A records and stuff like that? Do you use any historical DNS tools?
Yes, I definitely use historical DNS tools. I really like is that there's certain services that will register a subdomain with a third party. So there are some third-party services like ServiceNow and Microsoft that when you partner with those services, they will stand up subdomains underneath their top-level domain. An example would be like, if, say, TrustedSec used ServiceNow, it would be trustedSec.service-now or something like that.
Vanity domains.
Vanity domains. And that's part of the reconnaissance that we pull to identify, hey, are they using these services or are they not? And that's been really fruitful in the past as well.
And Hans, how would you detect, like, is there a good way to learn like what all third-party services are being used? Is there like a catch-all command for that, or?
There's not. And we've actually attempted on our side to build out a list, and it ends up being dependent on the service provider. So each third party does it a little differently. I mean, yes, the records are maybe the same, but the responses might be different. Some might be doing C names, some might be doing A records. I'm pausing here because I don't know if our OSN tool is public yet, because I think that's going to be something that's included in it.
Okay.
Do you have like a word list of third-party SaaS providers and stuff that you regularly search that you could share?
We do. And by we, I mean Justin Elzy.
Okay.
I mean, Hans do, but Justin has been keeping on top of that, and then he's feeding that to other people internally for a project that's coming down the road.
I would say it's also hard to automate because even though, let's say the example you used with TrustedSec using ServiceNow, the person that stands this up, he could choose like a totally different vanity domain, something unrelated to TrustedSec even. So it's kind of hard to automate. Yeah.
So you can catch our service. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to make a dumb joke. You can catch TrustedSec ServiceNow website at spicyunicorns.service-now.
You guessed it.
Yeah, man. All right. Now, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, like, we talked about passive recon. Two things I love. That is a tool or a website called Voxy. And that's something you can use to, like, figure out other domains that the company has registered. Not only their top-level domain, but let's say they have other domains or DNS records. That's super helpful. So you can do, like, reverse lookup of, like, the person registering the domain or whatever. So like you can trace back to other domains. It's super useful. The other thing is like Wayback Machine. I've had a lot of success with that tool. So I've had customers where we are going to fish or call people and couldn't find any phone numbers. And using Wayback Machine, going to their webpage a couple of years back, I could suddenly find phone numbers because they had that in the past and not in the present version of their homepage. So that could sometimes be super fruitful.
That's interesting. And I want to go off on a little tangent there. Do you guys have any kind of recommendations or ideas for, how to sort of, I guess, fix your OPSEC after the fact, given the internet never forgets?
I think you can send a takedown to Wayback Machine. I know some organizations have done that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the case, but I'm not 100% sure though.
Well, that's just something to keep in mind if you're responsible for doing things like cleaning up metadata and stuff on your site and old records, like where you maybe publish phone numbers and don't wish to anymore. Checking out how to get some of that stuff removed from Wayback Machine, and Google Cache is gone now. Miss Google Cache. That was always kind of my go-to, was find the cache version of the site, Well, so what's the first phases of active recon look like for you guys then?
I would say it depends, but most of my active stuff includes running a series of tools. I do a lot of the bbot tool. I use that a lot. Nuclei is another big hit for finding like vulnerable stuff, basically. Of course, Nmap, stuff like that. I also use Burp a lot, just manually poking at stuff. Git Dorker is another tool I use sometimes, just for looking at GitHub data in a little automated fashion. And also NTLM endpoints is something I look for. So I use different tools. NTLM scan is one, I think. There's also another one I can't remember the name of. Yeah, other than that, user enumeration is a big thing of mine. Used to use team filtration, but now I normally just use OneDrive enum to find active users in the tenant. Yeah, that's from the top of my head, the top things I do.
For active user discovery, are you usually starting with data from someplace like hunter.io, or are you just brute forcing names?
Yep.
What's the usual strategy?
Yeah, we kind of skip that step. So when I do passive, I normally go to like dhashed or something like that and pull down like a leaked list of passwords that will contain email addresses. So that way you can like figure out the pattern. If it's first name dot last name, or first three shares of the first name and three last of the last name, or whatever the recipe is. And then you can basically just spit or use that as an input to any enumeration tool you want to figure out users. Also LinkedIn, getting past data there from LinkedIn is a big one, I would say, as input to user enumeration.
I have nothing to add. I think I do the exact same thing. LinkedIn is typically my go-to. I'm not password spraying as much as I used to. A lot of these clients that I'm interacting with use a third-party identity provider that really has throttling enabled. And as a result, we don't get too many options or too many attempts before lockouts occur. So I tend to, I mean, I will do it, but it's not as successful. What I will end up doing is, using LinkedIn to then get names and then use that for crafting phishing campaigns when we get to that phase of the engagement. Yes, dhashed is great. I also use bbot and Nuclei. We also will be standing up infrastructure prior to the engagement or in the first day of the engagement to run these tools from. So that way they don't necessarily look like they're coming back to us. Depending on what we might discover during the initial reconnaissance, we might stand up that VPS either in the same technology stack that company is using, or the same region that company is at, just hopefully to blend a little bit more in and doesn't look like it's coming from whatever state I'm living in at the time.
So do you actually have pre-canned environments that are .NET and PHP and different versions of things just ready to roll with, huh?
We do. We have a talented employee by the name of Sam Link, who has spent a ton of time building out these images and even a tool for provisioning them. So when the start of an engagement happens, we can, with a few clicks, get stuff stood up, and we are ready to roll.
Somebody mentioned third-party IDPs. It might have been Hans. From an operational security standpoint, what has that done as far as the evolution of recon here? Do people get better eventing and stuff from those services? And does that make your initial kind of recon and user discovery and password efforts more detectable? Or is it actually creating a blind spot for a lot of these organizations?
I guess I would say it has been more frustrating from an attacker's perspective. They've done a better job at detecting and alerting. Whether or not those alerts make it to our clients is a different. There's been gaps there, but I don't put that blame on the identity provider.
And where does things like smart lockout and stuff, I'm sure Oddvar would like to talk about, fit into some of this?
Yeah, smart lockout is not fun at all. We always try to combat that, but I feel like it's a particular Microsoft that is good at smart lockout, I would say. So like you could spray a user a couple of times and then smart lockout will kick in normally. It helps to like rotate IPs, rotate regions, rotate all different things. But at the end, you will get smart lockout on a user. So it's kind of hard to avoid, to be honest. So normally you get like maybe 3 to 5 attempts per user during a spraying attack, and that's what you get. So hopefully you have one weak password among all the users you have enumerated. So before smart lockout kicks in, but that's how it is.
Okay. So not a lot's changed in terms of password spraying, really, because typically, I mean, if you were going after a smaller organization and stuff, they maybe didn't have the technology, but I would have imagined that even prior to Azure and stuff becoming the predominant directory service, if you were doing a lot of heavy password spraying, that's the kind of thing that would have gotten noticed anyway. After password spraying, are we really kind of into the world of social engineering, or are there other techniques that you guys are still using to kind of get that initial foothold?
Oh, that can be a bunch of things. So, I mean, if we find a vulnerable web server, that most definitely would be a way in. It's not that often anymore that we see that, but every now and then there's like a SQL injection or something that we can like exploit. So if that's the case, we will of course go that way instead of phishing. Nobody loves phishing, so yeah, I guess we exploit other venues first if we can. But yeah, normally after doing enumeration and some password spraying and not finding any way in, phishing or social engineering is the next step, I guess. I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Hans.
No, I was going to say something that has been really drawing my attention during the external portion of the engagement in reconnaissance, the passive stuff, with identifying subdomain takeovers. When we are enumerating these organizations, we're finding a lot of them are using these third-party providers for managing DNS or services, and there's leftover, maybe it's a lab or a dev staging system, or maybe someone, shadow IT or something like that. And if we can hijack that domain or service, it may not give us a foothold inside the organization, but we can certainly use it as part of social engineering, either standing up a phishing page or use it for our C2 domain. I know Oddvar's done that a few times. So it kind of dovetails into the next phase, which is, then social engineering, be it phishing, calling. One of the things I really like doing is calling the help desk, posing as a new employee or an employee who just lost their password. I don't really get, even if you use MFA, that's fine. But what I'm trying to do is get what that new password is, because if I can figure out what that new password is, I'm going to go back and try spraying all your previous users to see who also had that new password that was set there. Or maybe there's a pattern that we can clean based off of that password that was set. The last thing I was going to mention for social engineering based campaigns, two that I've been using with moderate success, is SMS-based phishing. That's been really fun. And then also out-of-band phishing. So I don't know if there's a special term for it, but hitting up people on LinkedIn or hitting up people on other services that employees register to, saying, hey, I'm looking to apply for a job. Here's my resume. Please click this link. Or, hey, you're licensing with XYZ organization that you've put on your resume saying, hey, I'm a registered, certified, whatever. I'm from that organization. Your license is about to expire. You need to update it. So it's not direct communication through the organization itself. It's kind of going out of bounds, because what I'm finding is these mail controls are getting better and better by the day, be it reputation or artificial intelligence. Landing in the inbox it's getting really tough.
Interesting. So that touched on some kind of defense topics. Is there anything that Blue Team can do anymore in terms of thwarting footprinting operations? Back in the day, we used to be playing with tar pits and honeypots and stuff like that. Do you see much of that anymore? And if you don't, what are people doing?
I definitely see honeypots, but I don't see it externally.
I think I once saw a honey token exposed on GitHub on purpose. I saw that once during the last 7 years. So I don't see that a lot, but I would say it's pretty useful. Like if somebody's using a honey token hidden somewhere, something's coming.
Almost a little surprised, because I would think that there would still be a lot of value in doing something like standing up an FTP server that you don't link to anything anywhere. And if somebody hits that port 21 on your domain, FTP dot, they're almost certainly some sort of scanner or something. And automatically you could take some points away from that IP reputation and things like that. But I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it's too many false positives. Not sure.
I think that's the problem, because there's so much noise on the internet today. So it's kind of hard to distinguish the real attackers from bots and stuff, I would say. That's my take on it, at least.
I can say I also think you run the risk of, if we can inadvertently, or I should say, if an attacker can inadvertently trigger that block. So say there's a control in place that says, hey, we detect scanning from this IP. We're going to block all traffic to that IP. Well, then if the attacker can identify that and says, "Oh, great, I'm going to spoof my attack to look like it's coming from a legitimate service," and now we've caused a denial of your regular activity, and that can be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you could really only use it for additional signal. Like, the SIM has already seen 50 other events from this IP, and it did this. So, okay, I see. Yeah, for sure. With so many corporate NATs and stuff, you don't want to be blocking IP addresses too aggressively because you are going to break things for legitimate users. Kind of with that in mind, and speaking of bots, are you guys doing any AI footprinting of any kind?
I've tried a few ones that will take, they do the screenshot of the page and then I'll try to do a rundown of what is the context behind it. I've not found any that have been better than just experience. Maybe if you're starting out and you don't know, like, oh, hey, this is an Apache Tomcat page, or, oh, hey, this is a whatever login page. Like, maybe if you don't know that stuff, having that AI tool to help, that might be good. But for now, just manual review has been best for me.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I wonder if you could do some sort of response augmented generation type stuff, though. I mean, after your scripts go out and collect everything, if you could ask some questions like, are there any Tomcat servers? Are there any, and have AI dig through some of the records for you. I don't know how valuable that would be. I mean, I think it would only make sense if the company had a lot of assets that were public, but there are companies like that. Go look at HP or
One of our coworkers, Scott White, will do this thing where he will find a vulnerability on a page, exploit it, and break in, and then you go and ask him, okay, so what tipped you off to this idea that this thing was, what was it that made you look further? And he would just say, I don't know, just had a feeling that this might be something. And I'm certainly not at his skill level, but there's definitely been pages where I've been, scouring through, hundreds of sites and applications, and one will just stick out, and I'll think, I think there might be something here, and just focus my energy on that. And I don't know if it's something that AI would be able to really pick up on, or maybe it's an outlier. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, I've worked with Scott for more than a decade now, and it's driven me crazy for, as long as I've known him. He spots everything. There's something about that guy. If there's anything that is slightly, abhorrent or, inconsistent with the general pattern of everything else he's seeing, he just locks in on it. And, I don't know, maybe some machine learning could do that or be taught to do that. But yeah, there's no substitute for Scott White. Well, do you guys have any kind of cool anecdotes or, aha moments or Scott White moments, we'll call them, that you'd like to share?
Are we just talking about external or other stuff?
I mean, anything from a, I guess, red team,
like an offensive standpoint, yeah,
perspective.
Yeah. So in regards to external testing, one that I've been looking at is when hitting a page, a web application, and it reports back saying something along the lines of, you are unauthorized to access this service from this IP or from this host where we're coming from. And I picked up on this technique through a CTF a while back where they had an administrative page that you couldn't hit because it was only on the LAN. Think of it like on your home router. You can only access the administrative page from the home network, but not the public internet. And in the CTF, the way they got around that was through burp. They would set the host header to either a RFC 1918 address, or they would set it to localhost. And then the web service would then allow it because it would think that was the permitted traffic to go through. And more than one occasion, that's been fruitful for us for gaining a foothold in organizations.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it's an oldie but a goodie. That's bypassed WAFs for years. It's confused reverse proxies and things like that. I have a collection of word lists and stuff that I have in Burp Suite, and it's got hosts and local hosts 127.0.0, the IPv6 version, all of them in there. And I still use it on every test, and very frequently I end up with different and sometimes interesting behavior with that. Yeah, it's amazing how long-lived that one's been.
And then internally, and we'll kick it over to Oddvar, I'll give you a chance to speak. There's been a tool set that's been released now public by Alex on our team called Titanus. I don't know if any of you folks listening are familiar with that on the feed, but he released a framework. I want to say it's like Impacket, but on steroids. It's a .NET version of it, but you can still run on a Mac and Linux. It, with a tool set, allows you to do certain things just like you would within Packet, but with all the IOCs. And so we've been using this internally for a while now and are super stoked to use it even more to see where it goes.
Yep. We actually did a Discord live event with Alex about Titanus. Yeah.
right.
So he actually gave a demo on it. So I believe it's recorded on our YouTube channel. So if you go to Trusted Sex YouTube channel, you should be able to find his demonstration of Titanus. That's my plug.
Yeah, I don't have an anecdote or something like that. I was going to say that hijacking of domains is still a thing. That's might be mind-blowing for some, because many people think that's fixed and you can't like hijack something. But that in 2025 is still a thing.
Have you ever found before we go here, have you ever found the IDP confusion situation where somebody's got something that, they formally had configured to authenticate with Google or authenticate with, such and such. They haven't changed the app, but they no longer use that external provider, and you can do account takeovers that way?
Not account takeovers. I've definitely seen where they've had either one in the past, a legacy, and they moved on, or they have multiple. And I found that to be really frustrating because now I'm trying to figure out what are you using? I don't have internal documentation or internal know-how to know what's going on. So from that perspective, I find it more frustrating than vulnerability.
Yeah, same.
So one thing that I kind of noticed is that a lot of the work that is done in these types of engagements is done before you even send an exploit, before you even drop your payloads. It's all recon. It's all OSINT. And I don't think that trend or that methodology, that process hasn't changed. And I don't think it will ever change unless you're a script kiddie that wants to do, some spray and pray stuff. But the way for penetration test engagements to be successful is through thorough OSINT, thorough reconnaissance, and heavy documentation.
If anything, I think we're spending more time on it. Organizations are using more technologies and services every day, and anything can trip us up. Maybe there's an endpoint control that we didn't identify before, or a domain name that we missed up, or a username naming convention we missed. There's so many things that can go wrong. And so we have to spend so much time focusing on just getting it right that I think we end up spending a lot of time on the externals, just doing the research before we, like you said, before we even send that one email or that one SMS message.
Yeah, and many times, I don't know, I've done, like almost every red team I do, I end up redoing reconnaissance over and over again because I find something new, or like something I discover on the inside is beneficial looking from the outside again. It's just pieces to a puzzle, I guess. I tend to redo OSINT recon stuff over and over again during engagements.
I do the same. 9 times out of 10, when I'm writing my report, I'll look over a lot of my my notes or like my history, like my logs and everything. I'm just like, oh wait, there's something there. Oh crud! And so I have to go back to the client and be like, hey, I think there was something here. Could I please get back into your system and check this out? Or I just have to like make a note in the report saying, hey, we think there's something here. Check on it in the next pen test.
Well, I hope this has been kind of insightful and instructive for everybody as far as how external pen testing and red teaming kind of begins, because I know the show tends to be AppSec heavy sometimes because of who hosts it. And, I always have that AppSec tester mindset where, the first thing I do is I just walk up and start kicking at the tires, right? It's very different, to see you guys sitting and researching the target so carefully. But thank you both, Hans and Oddvar, for joining us today. And I want to thank our listeners and all those who follow the show. Wish you guys happy hacking, and we'll be back with more of Security Noise soon. Security Noise is a production of Trusted Sec LLC. If your organization has any questions or needs around information security, visit www.trustedsec.com. Thanks again for tuning in.
Here you go.